An investigator could reach in and he could stroke them 3 times a day for about 5 minutes each. Of course, they didn't call it stroking, they called it tactile kinesthetic stimulation, which is the Orwellian term for stroking. God forbid call it love. But in any case, those children who received tactile kinesthetic stimulation for 5 minutes 3 times a day gained an average of 49% more weight per day, almost 50% weight gain more than the control group per day, leading the investigators to conclude that tactile kinesthetic stimulation is a cost-effective strategy because it can save $3,000 per admission. You can discharge the babies 5 days earlier. So believe it or not, now Blue Cross Blue Shield is making up a code for tactile kinesthetic stimulation, can be covered by insurance. What's happening in all these instances? The flow of consciousness is causing some matter to appear. In this case, the experience of love, translated, it was subsequently found, into very specific molecules called growth factors and growth hormones. In fact, those children who were stroked were secreting about 5 to 10 times more growth factor, growth hormone in their bodies, in their brain cells, but in all the cells of their bodies. There's a condition in children called psychosocial dwarfism, where children don't grow, they're brought up in orphanages, and you can give them good food and do everything you want, they still don't grow. And of course, if you're still entrenched in the superstition of materialism, you say, well, let me see what's happening, and you find that their growth hormone levels are very depressed. So you say, fine, I'll give them growth hormone injections. You give them growth hormones, they still don't grow, because the receptors refuse to accept the growth hormone. You take that child out of an orphanage, put it in a loving environment where there's somebody can stroke them, they can call somebody mother, and suddenly the growth hormone levels go up. Not only do the growth hormone levels go up, the receptors start soaking them up and the children start growing. Again, the flow of consciousness resulting in very distinct material expression. Very distinct material expression. So we are seeing here, in fact, another model emerging. That void of empty space is not an emptiness of nothing. That void of empty space is a fullness of consciousness. By consciousness, we mean an intelligence that interacts with its own self and then produces, conceives, constructs, governs, and actually becomes matter. So the expression being, becoming, being becomes, because that emptiness is a fullness of that non-material intelligence that is translating itself into the physiology and ultimately even the anatomy of our bodies. About a few years ago, I just mention a couple more studies because they're so to me as a scientist. The HEW, which is the Health Education Welfare Department in Massachusetts, looked once again at the risk factors for heart disease. And you'd say, why did they look at risk factors for heart disease? We know what they are: smoking and hypertension and high cholesterol and family history, etc. Well, the reason they looked at the risk factors for heart disease is that the majority of people who get heart attacks today do not have any of the usual standard risk factors. Did you know that the majority of people who have heart attacks today do not have the standard usual risk factors? So the HEW decided to look at it once again, and they found that the number one risk factor was what is called self-happiness rating. The number 2 risk factor was job dissatisfaction. It meant you could go on the street and you could ask people 2 questions. Number 1, are you happy? And number 2, do you love what you're doing? And if they could honestly say yes to both, then they were going to be okay. In India we would say, are you in dharma? Have you found your place in the universe? Do you know what your purpose here in life is? These are the 2 most frequent least cited and important risk factors, it turns out not only for heart disease, but it turns out for other diseases as well. In fact, a very astonishing statistic came out of these studies. It seems more people die in our culture today on one particular day of the week, and I'm sure you can guess which one that is. Monday. Guess what time? 9 o'clock on Monday morning, more people die in civilization than any other time of the week. It's an extraordinary and stunning and unique accomplishment for which only the human species can take credit. Presumably, no other animal knows the difference between Monday and Tuesday. What's the difference? It's an idea. It's a notion. Just a faint interpretation somewhere in the mind. And that's what the body is. When you experience tranquility, you have made an interpretation of a sensory experience as tranquil. And your body starts making Valium. And the Valium is not made just in the brain cells, it's made in all the cells of the body. The heart makes it, the immune cells make it, everywhere. And this Valium is secreted in very precise amounts, so you don't feel like a zombie. In fact, this is the molecular equivalent of tranquility. Even cells, leukocytes, red cells, they're all making this Valium, which is helping them do their job in tranquility. On the other hand, if you're feeling jittery, which is another interpretation of a sensory experience, then the body doesn't make Valium. It starts making jittery molecules called adrenaline, noradrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, etc., which have an adverse effect on the immune system. If you feel exhilarated, and that's another interpretation of another sensory experience, then the body makes interleukins, interferons. These are very powerful immunomodulators or anti-cancer drugs. Recently, interleukin-2 was used for the treatment of melanoma, which is a devastating skin cancer. Was also used in the treatment of kidney cancer, and in fact it was very effective. Very, very effective. 80% of the cases, the tumors can cleared altogether. The only problem is, as it's now available, it's quite toxic. That's number one. And number two, it's very expensive. A full course of interleukin can cost up to $40,000. But you take a ride on Magic Mountain in Disney World, you can make millions of dollars worth of interleukin-2, provided your interpretation of that experience is, this is fun. It's not the joyride. It's not the joyride, interpretation. That's the point. And who makes the interpretation? Where is that person who makes the interpretation? Can we localize it? We'll see we can't localize that. It's non-local. By non-local, I mean that person who makes the interpretation, we seem to think exists somewhere here, but in fact he's not only somewhere here, he, she, it, he's not only somewhere here, he's everywhere all at the same time. Everywhere in my body and everywhere in the universe. That evidence is now beginning to emerge that thoughts are not local phenomena. Thoughts are not local phenomena. You think that your thought is unique to you, that's localized somewhere in the brain. Well, that evidence is now beginning to emerge that that's not the way it really happens. For example, if I have the thought, I am thirsty, which I have now, right now, the thought. As soon as I have the thought, I am thirsty, my brain cells will make a chemical called angiotensin II. It's the molecular equivalent of the notion, I am thirsty. My brain cells will make that. There's another part of my hypothalamus that is part of my brain, will also make angiotensin II. It causes, so in my brain, angiotensin, what does it do? It modifies my behavior in such a way that I start looking for water. I start looking for a water faucet or a glass, etc. As soon as I have that thought, simultaneously another part of my brain, called the hypothalamus, it also makes angiotensin II, which causes the hypothalamus to secrete a hormone called ADH, which makes the body hold on to water. My kidneys make angiotensin II at the same time, so that my kidneys start holding on to water. My heart cells make it, my skin cells make it. So as soon as I have the notion, I'm thirsty, that's a molecular equivalent simultaneously everywhere in my body all at the same time. And if that isn't astonishing enough, I could go and measure angiotensin in you when I am thirsty, and you'll find that there's a flicker, a little bump. It goes up in you too. So we are sharing our ideas all the time, and these ideas are not confined to any one place. They are everywhere all at the same time, simultaneous. This morning, Dr. Curtis used the expression omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. Well, that's how the mind is. It's simultaneously aware of everything all at the same time, and it can correlate these activities. Of course, scientists are afraid of using these terms, so they won't say omniscience, they'll say organizing power contained in a field, or correlation, ability to infinitely correlate things. But in fact, what scientists describe as infinite organizing power of a field or infinite correlation in a field are expressions of what Dr. Curtis this morning was calling omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. A human body displays all those abilities all the time. A human body, for example, is literally a field of infinite correlation. Human body is really a field of infinite correlation. It can kill germs, it can play a piano, it can eliminate toxins, make a new baby, and monitor the movements of the stars all at the same time, and correlate them with each other all at the same time. It's true not only of the human body, it's true of all living species. Flowers will change their color if the earth gets warm, and then they'll reflect more sunlight because they'll want the earth to cool down. They sense the discomfort of the earth. They feel the compassion for the earth. Field phenomenon of information. Flowers will change their color if the earth cools down too much so that they can absorb more sunlight to warm the earth. So these feedback loops of information are not confined either to the human body or to the body of a flower. They are pervasive everywhere in the whole universe, in all the galaxies. And this is the basis, literally, of Ayurveda, Sanskrit expression, yatha pinde tatha brahmande, which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. And sometimes scientific audiences, when you use the word cosmic mind, they get very scared because you're introducing spirituality into science. So we don't use the word cosmic mind. We say it's a non-local information with cybernetic feedback loops of a self-referral nature. It's all right. Then it's fine. So I think the conclusion of this part should be that we are not physical machines that have learned how to think. It's the other way around. We are quantum events in the unified field, fluctuations of information or thoughts that have learned how